Welcome back, McFly subscribers. We're continuing the medium-sized streamer series with the classic rabbit zonker. This is a fairly simple streamer that has been around for a long time, yet extremely effective still to this day. Now, I will discuss this fly and its uses further in the video, as I'm sure you all want to get started tying right away, but in case you haven't seen this channel before, this is McFly Angler.
Starts now.
Okay, let's start tying. Place the hook securely in your vise. For a hook, I'm using Risen Streamer 200 in size 6. This is a 2x heavy and 4x long hook. The longer length is important here. And as you can see, this is a fairly long shank hook. It also has a down eye, which the hook eye position isn't super important for this pattern though. But we will need to add weight, and for that I'm using this lead-free wire. You can use regular lead wire, but I prefer the lead-free. And I'm using a .015 size. And I like to add these spools into a bobbin holder also, which makes it super easy to put onto the hook. I'm going to add 15 wraps of lead here. Add more or less according to your needs. More of course for quicker sink and less for slower sink. Break off the excess and push the wraps together. Also position the head slightly forward on the hook shank like this. Now we will need some thread, and today I'm using Vivus 140 in white. This is a very strong thread, which you will need. Use whatever color you wish. The thread color will determine the color of the fly head. So start the thread behind the hook eye, but don't cut off the waist just yet. Use it to help jump over the lead wraps. Cut off the waist once you pass the lead, and then go back up over the lead, and then come back down into the bend of the hook slightly, and back up a couple wraps so you end right at the start of the hook bend. Now we need something called Mylar cord tubing for the body. This comes in a few different sizes and colors, from many different manufacturers. Here's a very thick one, and a super thin here. This is a medium size, and this is a slightly smaller medium size one. Pearl is very common, but I'm actually out of that color. Okay, let's measure out a section that is slightly past the hook eye and a hook eye gap or so behind the hook bend. Then cut it off the rope. By the way, you'll need some extremely sharp scissors for this, and these Risen standard scissors work wonderfully. So this material has a rope core to it that we need to remove, which leaves us with a flashy hollow tube. But we do need to fray one end, so poke your scissors through it a few times like so. Okay, let's push this tube up through the front of the hook and back past our thread so it's sticking out the back of our hook, about a hook gap back. You might need to brush back the fibers a bit to make sure they aren't trapped. Then let's make a couple tight wraps over it. And I do mean tight, you really need to cinch down on this. Now this will have a tendency to spin on the hook, so to fix that, we will add a dot of the Solarez Ultra Thin Resin. Then cure it into place, which should help keep this from spinning. Now we need some rabbit zonker strips, and this one is white with brown bars. Now these come in many different colors, in both solid and barred. Here's a magnum size strip, which means it is a bit thicker. Today we want the normal, thinner strips, but if you're tying a much larger one, go with the magnum. So the fur is angling one way on the strip. Find the end of the strip with the fur direction going towards it, and cut a notch at the end. This will make the tail move a little bit more. Now measure out the strip so the hide extends slightly past the mylar tail, and find where the tip of the hook is under the mylar core. Then cut the strip off at that measurement. Wet your fingers and pull the fur back to expose the hide right at where your thread is. Then make 3 to 4 very tight wraps over the hide. And now you can whip finish it. However, the rest of the fly gets in the way of the whip finish. So if you want a whip finish, you need to try and do it by hand like this. However, there is an easier way. You don't really have to whip finish. Just grab some of that Solarez bone dry and paint a little over the thread wraps. Then cure it and cut off the waist. You might say, hey, you already whip finished it. That wouldn't hold. But I will show you that it does hold in the next variation that we will tie in this video. Okay, now we need to hold back this rabbit fur. And I find these little twist ties that come on fly line spools work perfect for this. Wrap it around the hide and it will hold it back, giving us room to work on the next portion of this fly. Now let's pull back the body material a little and cut off any excess sticking out past the hook eye. See how it is just covering the hook eye? This is what you want. Okay, pull it back to expose the hook shank and start your thread right behind the hook eye once again. Cut off the waist and then let go of the body. Now pinch the body and tie it in so the mylar isn't sticking up past the hook eye. However, it's hard to do this. So just tie it in even if it's sticking up past the hook eye and then pull it back out of the hook eye after you capture it. And wrap over the tips. Make a couple more tight wraps up and down to form a small head on the fly, and you can see how this body holds its shape. It will compress when you push on it, but it returns right back to a belly. Okay, now let's unwrap the rabbit zonker and comb back the fur. Then pull back some of the fur at the front because you want a little extra fur like this. So make sure you're not just tying in the hide at the tip. Adding a little more fur will help bush out the front, making this look better. Pull up that hide, hold down the fur, and make a few tight wraps over it, ensuring to keep it directly on top of the fly like so. Now cut off the waist, but do so at an angle on both sides to form a V. This will help taper the material, which will leave a nicer looking head on the fly. Pull back the fur and wrap over the tag with some tight wraps, ensuring to cover everything. It is difficult to make a smooth head, but do your best. When you're happy with the head, then whip finish the fly from back to front and trim off the waist. That fur gets in the way a lot, so it's best to wet your fingers and comb it back, which will help manage it. Okay, let's get more of that Solarez Ultra Thin and coat the head with it. Then cure it with your UV light while spinning it. This will leave a nice glossy finish and also make the fly super durable. Now, the first coat usually isn't super glossy, since the resin likes to soak into the thread wraps. I usually do 2 coats to really make this shine up. Okay, there we have it, the finished rabbit zonker. So there is some discussion online about when the Zonker came out. Apparently, they were using rabbit strips in New Zealand as early as the 30s. But what we tie today, a more modern baitfish streamer, has its roots back in the 70s. Either way, this is a classic pattern that has withstood the test of time. And for good reason. It's super quick and easy to tie, very simple with only a few materials, inexpensive materials at that, and makes a streamer that is almost irresistible to trout. Rabbit fur moves in the water like no other material. Little light twitches, or a super slow current will make it move, creating a lifelike breathing or swimming action. Yet it still does very well in fast-moving water or quick retrieves. When swimming, it really does look like a little baitfish or leech, both of which will get trout's attention. And not just trout, these work great for bass and even saltwater fish as well. Of course, you would want to switch out the hook for a saltwater hook if fishing for saltwater species, but I've caught redfish, speckled trout, and even flounder on rabbit zonkers before. They're universally effective on almost all fish species. Being a simple pattern means there are also many variations, and I'm going to show you a few now. Let's add another hook to our vise, same hook as we've been using, and that Mylar core lends itself to adding rattles to this fly. You can pick up these fly rattles in most fly shops or online, and if any of you fish for bass, you know how well rattles work. You can see these are glass or plastic tubes with some small metal balls that bounce around. Now we will still need some lead, but need to do this a little different this time. Add half the amount of wraps and then push them together, then add the other half and push those together. Now wrap over them and spread out about the diameter of the rattle. After measuring the distance, then wrap over both the lead wraps and end halfway between them. Now attach the rattle by wrapping over it like so, up and down the rattle with very tight wraps. Then bring your thread down into the bend and back up to the start of the hook bend once again. Now let's push this rattle down on the underside of the hook like so. And it's a good idea actually to get a wider gap hook for this, as it's not leaving a lot of room here, but this should still be okay. Just keep that in mind. To hold this into place, let's paint some of that UV resin on the thread wraps and cure it. Now this won't spin. Here I have the slightly thicker Mylar core, and push that up over the rattle and tie it in the same way as before. You can see that this Mylar core covers the rattle and makes it not seen, and still gives the same look as the previous fly, but maybe with a slightly fuller belly. Okay, everything from this point is exactly the same, so I will speed through most of this. I do want to show you how using just the UV resin without a whip finish will hold. Really, give this a try. I mean, if you can whip finish, then do so, as it is probably a bit more secure that way, but I've never had this come loose on me. Here though, I'm switching out the front thread for a black thread because I wanted a black head instead. Again, tie these however you want and in whatever colors you see fit. Another little trick here is if you have any of the Mylar fibers up past the hook point and can't move it back, grab a lighter and burn it off. It will melt those tag ends back and out of the hook eye. But just be careful, as you can burn your thread if you hold the flame there too long. Okay, let's finish up this fly the same way. I'm going to be honest, I'm not happy with the head here, but oh well. I'm sure you can do better than me. You can see with that black thread how this resin really shines that up. I love this Solarez resin. It's really great stuff. Okay, there we have it, the finished Zonker with a rattle. In many situations, especially fishing for bass, fish will go after a lure or fly based on other senses besides sight. Big water displacing flies work well because they push so much water, causing vibrations in the water that the fish can sense. Same thing goes with rattles. The sound will attract the fish, and sometimes more than sight, especially if you're fishing stained or dirty water. Okay, let me show you one more variation. Everything is the same here as before, so I will speed up through most of this until we reach the deviation. Now here I'm using a very dark brown, almost black strip. Alright, here's the change. You can add a feather collar. And here I have this beautiful whiting American hackle saddle. Now you want the soft hackle feathers, which usually comes from a hen and not a rooster. You can test to make sure by bending the feather. If the fibers tend to stay clumped together, it's a soft hackle. If each individual fiber sticks out by itself, it's a rooster saddle. Saddles have a slight gradation of feather sizes, these down here being much larger than the ones up top. For this size fly, I'm looking for a feather from about this region. We will want to prepare this feather for tie-in by stripping off all the fuzzy fibers at the base of the feather. It's a good idea to measure this as well to make sure that the feather is the right size for your hook. You will want the feathers to extend back just shy of the end of the belly. Now we won't be using the entire feather here. Normally you would pull back the feathers at the tip like this, but we will be using far less of the feather. So let's pull them back like this, leaving just a short section of the feather. But this tie-in is way too long, so let's cut that. Okay, tie this in at the front of the fly with some tight wraps. Then capture the stem with some hackle pliers and proceed to wrap this while pulling back the fibers with each wrap. Once you use up the feather fibers and the collar is formed, then capture the feather stem. And I usually try to pull back the stem and wrap over it reversed as well. Here for some reason I was having trouble with the front portion spinning. I think this is because I didn't lay down enough of a thread base to begin with. So learn from my mistakes and start your thread up by the hook eye and not a little ways down. I find that if I brush out the feather, the fiber usually lays a little bit more evenly. Okay, use your thumb to force the fibers on top to move out sideways. And then pull the rabbit strip up over the top of the fly and the feather. Capture it like we did before. Trim off the waist at an angle. Clean up the head. Whip finish. Cement the head. And this variation is now finished. See, the first one I tied is more like a base version, one that you can add to, so get creative and make your own versions. Rabbit strips and feathers come in many different colors. Here is a blue version with a pink collar. Now I didn't show this here, but if you don't have the Mylar tubing, just wrap the body with Flashabou, Mylar braid, chenille, or whatever else you can think of. Make the collar out of something other than feathers if you wish. A few examples could be a dubbing loop with various types of dubbing or fiber, polar chenille, dubbing brushes, or whatever else you want to give a try. Add rubber legs off the side, or crystal flash off the tail, put 3D eyes on the head, use a cone head, or a bead. The possibilities are endless here, so get creative. And let me know in the comments section what variations you've tried, as I'm always interested in seeing what you all come up with. Not only are these easy to make variants of, but they are very quick to tie and extremely effective. Rabbit fur is one of those magic materials. It flows so well in the water and elicits strikes when other materials fail. From predatory trout to bass, and even saltwater fish, both inshore and offshore, will all eat this fly. So if you're not already tying this in your streamer lineup, you gotta give it a try. Okay, well I'm 3 flies into this month's medium-sized streamer series. I started off this series with the Deceiver, one of the most well-known and popular streamers ever made. Last week I tied up the Sparkle Minnow for you all, A fairly new pattern that is probably the most effective attractor streamer. I mean, what fish will not notice all that flash? Then of course this week we tied up the rabbit zonker. And check back next week as I will be tying the circus peanut, a fly that paved the way to our modern articulated streamers. And since my videos come out on Thursdays, this video will actually come live on Christmas Day. So make sure you're subscribed and click the bell notification so you don't miss any future videos like this circus peanut. By the way, these all foam fly boxes are finally available now on Amazon with free shipping. I do apologize that it took so long. I know a lot of you were asking when they will be in stock, and finally they came available. These are thin enough to fit in most chest pack pockets, yet they still have enough room to hold large streamers without compressing the material, and on both sides as well. The clasps are magnetic and very strong, and the boxes are made entirely of foam, so they float when accidentally dropped in the water. Also, with those magnetic clasps, they almost always close when they land, so you won't lose any flies, or the entire box if you accidentally drop them when fishing. I can't tell you how many flies these boxes have saved me, and if you're as clumsy as I am, these are the perfect boxes for you. They also make great gifts for your fishing friends, so pick up a few while supplies last. I will link below to my Amazon storefront if you're interested in picking up these boxes. Also, don't forget to check out my sponsor, Risen Fly. They made the hooks I use today, but they also make some of the best fly rods and reels for the money I have ever used. Best off, they're offering you all a discount. So if you're in the market for a new rod or a bunch of hooks or beads, go to www.risenfly.com and type in McFly at checkout and they'll give you 15% off of your first order with them. Okay, thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this video, do me a favor and click the like button. Also, if you could share my videos with all your fishing friends, I would really appreciate it. I will see you all next week on Christmas Day, so Merry Christmas to you all. Now you go catch some fish.